Words are flowing out like endless rain into a paper cup. They slither wildly as they slip away across the universe. Pools of sorrow, waves of joy are drifting through my open mind, possessing and caressing me. Jackaroo Deva, oh. Nothing's gonna change my world. 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 Images of broken light which dance before me like a million eyes. They call me on and on across the universe. Thoughts meander like a restless wind inside a letterbox. They tumble blindly as they make their way across the universe. Jackaroo Deva, oh. Nothing's gonna change my world. 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 Sounds of laughter, shades of life are ringing through my open ears, enticing and inviting me. Limitless, undying love which shines around me like a million suns. It calls me on and on across the universe. Jackaroo Deva, oh. Nothing's gonna change my world. 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 Jackaroo Deva, Jackaroo Deva, Jackaroo Deva, Jackaroo Deva.
On October 29th, 2012, Superstorm Sandy slammed into the east coast of the United States. At the time, the storm was over 1,000 miles wide. It affected millions of people up and down the East Coast. It would be impossible to tell the stories of all those whose lives were altered by Sandy. Instead, you will hear the story told by a few people in a 1-mile strip of land known as Rockaway Beach on the southern end of New York City.
Why I decided to stay during Sandy was it's my hometown. I mean, like I said to someone, if the ship's going down, I'm going down with it. So, you know, for everyone I know, my whole family lives here, so we all stayed.
I decided to stay because I wanted to protect my house, of course. When I saw the ocean that afternoon at low tide, I came home. My wife wanted to stay. she left last year during Irene, and she thought she could ride this one out too. Again, I went up to the beach wall at low tide, and it was raging. And I said to her, "You got to go." I said, "This is going to be bad tonight. I think you got to leave." So I decided to stay with my oldest son Ray. He's 15 years old, but he's a big kid. He's 6'4". So I thought I'm going to need the help. My daughter Lauren, she decided to stay as well too, against my better judgment. In hindsight, I absolutely would have made her leave, but I let her stay with me.
I decided to stay just because I had nowhere else to go. This is where I was raised and born, and my family's from Ireland, so there wasn't anywhere else to be.
I didn't think it was going to be like that. I didn't know the water was going to be up to my top steps, and I didn't know there was going to be fires. I just thought there was going to be some water in the basement, but that's it.
I decided to stay because I never really thought to leave, and personally I kind of wanted to see it. You know, I love the ocean and everything. I wanted to see what would happen.
We decided to stay the day of the storm because kind of during Irene, nothing really happened as far as the water coming up, and my house actually, an electric fuse blew, so our house almost pretty much burned down if we hadn't been there.
And Hurricane Irene brought flooding into the area, and that was a direct hit. So we expected water, and we really didn't get that much water up to the staircases of the houses or up to the or into the basements of the houses. We were very lucky with Hurricane Irene.
At first we went to the boardwalk only 2 hours before, kind of being silly, walking around on the boardwalk, taking pictures, and just looking at how amazing the waves were, and it was not like anything I've ever seen.
This year my husband didn't want to go, and I felt that it would be bad, and I pictured it, the water coming up and maybe going into the first floor a little bit, but we have a second and a third floor, so I thought we would be fine. We would take precautions, which we did. We got water stations and lighting everywhere, and the cats were secure, and everything was moved up that we could. And I had a picture of it like getting to the second step from the first floor, and then maybe the third, possibly a few inches onto the first floor. And that would be the worst of it. But, that's not what turned out to happen for us.
They hyped up Irene pretty good, and it was kind of a dud for the most part. And I mean, people knew this one was going to be bad, but I don't think they knew it was going to be this bad.
Well, I should have known that the storm was going to be serious when me and my niece and my daughter went down to the boardwalk to take a look after the morning high tide, and the waves were big and they were crashing underneath the boardwalk, coming out the other side. We were up on the boardwalk taking pictures, and I remember when Irene hit, we actually went to the boardwalk at the height of the storm, and it was the same as that. So I should have known. This was early in the morning now for Sandy, which was like 12 hours before the real high tide.
Well, my boyfriend Bobby is a surfer, so he knows weather, and in the morning he woke me up at like 8 a.m. and we kind of walked around to see what was going on. It was the first high tide, and we went to like the bay and we saw the water going over the wall, and some places were pretty heavily flooded already. So the wind was really nuts and the wires were going crazy, and we decided to pack whatever we had and go to the building to our friend Pete's house.
I woke up really early in my room before most of the people in the house, and I looked out my window and I saw that the street was already flooding from Newport towards the bay.
I checked the high tide in the morning, and there was already some water up there, and the storm was still about 500 miles away, so I figured it probably was a good idea to get out of there.
The first high tide had come, and we're all at the beach wall taking pictures and videos and posting them on Facebook. But then, as the day went on, the water was getting higher and higher.
My cousin Trish was at work, so I was worried that maybe she wouldn't be able to get home that morning. So I got up and I walked around a little bit. I waited for her to get home, and then my family, my uncle, my aunt, and Trish waited for the water to recede, and then me and my uncle and my cousin Trish went over to the beach to the 90s and looked at the ocean to see if it was starting, if it was getting bad, and the water was rushing under the boardwalk and the waves were really ridiculous, and we filmed a little bit of it and just checked out what had happened so far, and it was not a good start.
During the day, we came down to the boardwalk, we were taking pictures and videos of the waves and stuff, and probably around 3, 4 o'clock, we kind of realized that this wasn't going to be the same as last year. The waves were already starting to come up over the boardwalk. The water was getting pretty high, it was getting pretty windy, and at that point we decided to retreat back to our house and set up shelter there.
About 3:30 in the afternoon, and the waves are 20 plus, and during Irene, there was nothing like that, and we still had many hours to go before this thing was supposed to hit, and it was just, it just seemed really bad.
Then in the afternoon, once again, I went up to the beach wall at about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Beach wall on the bay side was breached. They were doing construction work there, so a couple of my neighbors decided to come up, take a look at it, and I saw how bad it was at low tide. I said, this is going to be pretty serious. It's going to be bad. And then that night, at around 6 o'clock, 3 hours before high tide, water started coming up the block, and at that point, I knew that we were in for a real serious event.
We went out at about 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and my husband decided to take us for a real tour around, and there were several very scary encounters that we had. One down by 97th Street, and the surf was coming up. It just nearly missed us, and then driving back right in front of Harbor Light, our car almost got stuck, and I thought that was going to be the most harrowing experience of our evening. I thought once we were home we would be safe and secure, just worry about a flood coming in, and we had those other floors.
We'd had sandbags on the windows. We tried to border up the basement as best we could, but it kind of never really crossed our minds to bring stuff up from the basement. We had a bunch of food and water and everything we would need in case of an emergency. We had everything in our basement. And the one thing my sister, we went downstairs and there was water hitting our ankle, we were ankle deep in water. And the first thing and only thing my sister said was grab the luggage, because suitcases are expensive. So we grabbed the suitcases and we ran upstairs, and I turned to my mom and said, shouldn't we get everything else that's down there? She said, no, we'll just go down and get it later. And later, there wasn't a later. Everything was underwater within a few hours.
My greatest fear was, at one point, I looked out the window and I really believed that I'd bury 5 of my friends within that week. It was terrifying to think that maybe the next day somebody that I love wouldn't be there anymore.
My greatest fears at the time when shit was hitting the fan was I can't do anything at this moment. Like, I felt helpless. I felt like I needed to do something, and there was just that feeling of helplessness, like there's so much that has to be done, and we really couldn't do anything. The water was too high. It was a terrible feeling.
I was just worried about other people I know that stayed, whether they would get out of where they were, especially when the fire started. I was really nervous. I was calling a lot of people.
The storm started, and we saw the water coming up the block like we did Hurricane Irene, and we had no fear of it. It was coming up at a pretty good clip, though. I will say, being a fisherman and a surfer, I know that the water rises about a foot an hour, and then all of a sudden we saw it rising about 2 feet an hour, and then I knew that we were going to have a problem.
But then, as we were looking out the window, and once the boardwalk was gone, it was too scary to look out the window anymore. I didn't want to see anything else.
I started to realize how bad it was going to be, and what was going to happen to me and my house as the water started coming in around 6 o'clock that night, 7 o'clock that night. I had sandbagged my house. I have a basement entrance which I had 4 feet of sandbags around. All my windows, all my basement windows. but there was no holding back this water. As it started to rush up my driveway, came down my steps into my basement. I had actually siliconed my basement door shut with sandbags. I thought this is going to be able to withstand it. And while I was down there, the door blew off its hinges, and water started rushing in from the door, from the windows, basically from everywhere. At that point, we knew. My greatest fear at that point was that my basement was going to flood, which it did. It flooded to 9 feet, flooded to the ceiling. My son, Ray, his bedroom was down there. So at that point in time, my greatest fear was that I had lost my basement. My son had lost basically all of his possessions.
We saw cars, and then when the water was high, almost covering the entire cars, like a regular like sedan, I guess you call it, right? And some of the cars like short-circuited, and like lights were going on and like alarms and stuff. So it was scary to think that maybe someone was in the cars and they're just kind of floating around like boats. Like even giant vans were moving back and forth, and like people still walking around outside trying to look for higher ground. It was scary.
The water just kept rising, and it was rising at a rapid pace. We knew what time high tide would be, probably between 8:30 and 9. So, I mean, at 6 o'clock, the water was so deep and moving so fast, I didn't know where it was going to stop. We were never worried about drowning. We always knew we can go to second floor to third floor, but you know, how much of our house would be destroyed was our concern at the time.
It sounded like Niagara Falls coming through the house. It was one of the scariest experiences.
Greatest fear I had was the safety of my wife and kids, and my in-laws who were up the block. To be honest, the water didn't really affect us. We got flooded, we heard it come in through the windows and the doors, and we all gathered together, and I told them, look, we're going to be okay. We're going to make it through this. We got a pretty substantial, well-built house, and we're going to do okay.
My apartment's about 2 blocks that way, and the water line was probably about right here. So it was probably a good idea to get out of there when we did.
We were on the first floor of the house, and the water started pouring in through the windows so fast. There was nothing we could do to stop it. So my dad had told us to all go and stay on the first floor, and we did. But when we got to the first floor, the water started coming up to the floorboards. And right away he said, grab what you can, we have to go, it's time to go.
I think about an hour into the storm when the lights finally went out, and 20 minutes after that, the water was into the driveways, which we've never experienced before. We noticed that it started covering the basement windows from the first floor looking down, and I said we were going to get flooded in the basement. So at that time, all of a sudden the windows popped out. They went pop, 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 real quick. And all of a sudden the basement started flooding up like out of the movie Titanic. You just saw the waters rushing into the stairwells. You saw all the paperwork downstairs, any of their personal belongings coming up the stairwells. It was pretty amazing sight, and the speed in which it came in.
At first the water was going through the boardwalk, and that was fine. And then the next time I looked out the window, it was just completely gone besides the cement pillars. And it was just, for something to destroy something so strong and was amazing. The boardwalk was just floating by with benches and lights on it still, and it was terrifying.
At one point, my neighbor Kenny called me to see, you know, how we're making out and tell me what's going on in his house. And at that time, I happened to be filming the water racing down the street. So I'm talking to him, and all of a sudden, a piece of the boardwalk, probably about 15 feet long, 20 feet long, totally intact with its railings, and I think there might have been a bench, coming down the street like a boat right in front of the house. Let's be happy that we're going to be safe, hopefully, and our kids are safe. We'll go up to higher ground. That's most important. Everything can be replaced. I know. I know. Look outside, man. You're not going to believe this. Fucking crazy. Yep. I know. That could be our way out of here. That could be our fucking ship to Brooklyn. Oh, it's 4 feet. Room, yeah. All right, buddy. All right, we'll see what happens. Just be positive. There's nothing we can do. You got it. Bye.
I started to worry about, are the houses going to be okay? Are people going to be okay? My parents live on 126th Street, and their house gets water pretty frequently. So they became a concern for me throughout the night.
Throughout the night, my uncle and I were really worried about how high the water was going. We kept going back and forth between the basement stairs and the front stairs and watching how high the water was going. Early on, my cousin Mike and me and Liz went down in the basement and were realizing that all of our efforts to prevent the water from entering the basement were failed, and the water was breaching under the stairs and it was coming in from the seams of the door, and all of a sudden the basement door burst open and the water came flooding in quick.
Flew open!
Dad, are you sure the first floor is safe?
Yeah, I don't think it is.
It's going to reach the same height as outside. That's how high it will go.
All right, you're right.
It's going to reach the same height as outside. So when it's coming up our stairs, then you're going to start worrying about the first floor.
That was so mysterious.
Shit, Liz. Get Liz.
Mike, listen, everything was in the
What else was in there? Pictures?
I don't know, yeah.
We should have taken everything.
Me and my cousin's fiance Liz were immediately having a Titanic reaction where we thought the water was going to just come rushing in and we were going to be underwater instantly, so we ran from it, and then we realized it was going to meet the same level as outside, and that wasn't going to be a problem. But at that point you knew that the basement was gone. It was just going to rush and rush and rush until it met the height of outside, which was really high at that point.
Eventually, we noticed that the line on the basement wall had finally reached a peak, and it was slowly going down now, so we knew we had hit high tide and that we were going to be safe.
It became a little concerning once houses started catching fire that we didn't leave. Where are you going to go if the house catches fire? But other than that, I was never that concerned with my life. When the water started to recede later on in the evening, myself and my roommates, we tried to make an effort to get up to our parents' houses uptown more, but we only made it about a block to 2 blocks before we realized that we're going to get hurt worse if we try to do this. We're going to be no good up there if we can't make it, and now we're stuck somewhere. There was too much debris in the way. It was still very windy. There was water around. It was very cold. So we decided to turn around and wait till morning.
So that was the worst that I thought we would experience, but then the water came in, you heard walls crashing down, and then there was a fire.
As the storm, or as the surge hit somewhere in the 9 o'clock range, I was monitoring from my kitchen, which has steps leading down into my basement, how far the water had risen. First marked it as it was 2 feet away from coming in onto my first floor, then marked it as it got to 18 inches, then 12 inches. It started to slow at that point, and I was hoping that the worst of it had already hit. It eventually rose to about 2 inches within coming onto my first floor, so I could see it from my kitchen, from my front door, and my back deck. It got within an inch or two of coming into the house, but it never did. So at that point in time, I knew I had lost my basement. I knew it was bad, but I thought that we'll be okay. The basement, everything could be replaced. Rip it out, start all over again. The first floor was saved. I was hopeful that would have been the worst of it, but as we know now, it wasn't.
At some point, I would say that all of Rockaway was under 6 feet of water at least. Probably more in some places and less in others. So if you think about it, at that point, Broad Channel was underwater, Howard Beach was underwater, Brighton Beach, Manhattan Beach, Coney Island. We were probably 7 miles from the closest shoreline. We were in the middle of the ocean, basically.
Pete, who we were staying with, is a fireman, so he had his radio. And when at first we saw the glow in the sky. Everything was dark besides this red glow. And the only light that you saw were the reflections off the water and the glow in the sky. So we're looking and you couldn't see the fire, and then we're hearing the radio go off, and not only is there a fire that we could see right here in the boulevard, but there was a fire on 130th, there was a fire in Breezy where I grew up.
And the fire that was on 114th Street, we could see the sparks flying off and hitting the back of our house, some of the embers, and we were worried that is that going to result in our house going up in flames, because it wasn't really raining, so it's not like there was a lot of water in the air, the water was on the ground, and there was not a lot of evacuation options.
I remember texting like my friends, like whoever, and I just said, all of Rockaway is burning down. Like, not only was the flood scary, but fires, what are you going to do now?
I had my gear with me. I threw on my turnout coat, my helmet, and I walked down there just to see if these guys needed a hand. They needed a hand for sure.
He's a fireman, so of course he wanted to go out. It was breaking his heart to look at this glow and know that people were in trouble. So he came out in his gear, and I knew that he had to go and do what he does for a living, but I didn't want him to go alone, so I looked at Bobby and I knew that it was what had to be done just to even just save someone, or if someone was in trouble they could help each other. And I didn't feel comfortable letting Pete go out by himself, so Bobby put on my polka dot rain boots and went out with him.
We tried to make it out there. The water was way too high. We couldn't make it down. I live on 107th Street. Fly was on 115th Street. We tried to make it down. We made it maybe a block. Water was way too high. We came back, waited it out. I had a fire department radio. There was they couldn't even, the fire department couldn't make it there.
First time, we kind of just wanted to see if our neighbors were okay, and Pete said, let's go see what this fire looks like. He's like, if there's somebody in trouble, we can help. We're not afraid of the water. We'd be able to do it. So I was like, if you're going, I'm going to go with you. So we came down first. We checked on my apartment. I checked on my neighbors. They thought someone was trapped in a car, so we checked this car out, but it was fine. And we got about 2 blocks east of here, and we saw this fire, and we kind of stood in the street for a second, and we were like, we couldn't even get to it. The water was about this deep. In the middle of the street, it might have been even deeper. And there was no fire trucks, and this thing was just raging. You were seeing pieces of wood floating by, and Pete's like, there's really nothing we could do. He's like, what are we gonna do, splash water on it? So we went back to the apartment.
The water was so high, he said like he was walking regular in the water, and he stepped on a piece of the boardwalk, and the nail went through the boot. So then he learned that he had to kind of shuffle through. But thank God he had those things. I made him shove his feet into those tiny rain boots. I was like, you're wearing these. And they're gone now with a nail through the bottom. But he had shorts on with his hurricane safety hat, so.
They weren't in Breezy. My father was in Florida with his friends, and my mother was in Bay Ridge. I was in contact with my dad. He was calling me Edward Murrow because I kept giving him the reports. He's like, calm down. It can't be that bad. I'm like, it's that bad. The whole neighborhood's on fire.
At first it was kind of like exciting, but at that point when they were going out, and his pregnant wife, she was 7 months at that time, we're sitting in the apartment scared, but that's what firemen do, right?
And then when we found out that they could get help there, we came. When we heard there was people trapped apparently at the bodega, and I used to teach this neighborhood, so we wanted to see if we could help them, and Pete figured he could jump in with the firemen.
Maybe about midnight or so, we made another attempt to get down there, me and Bobby Butler. And we made it down here, waist to chest deep water, which surprisingly was a lot less than it was before. So we made it down here, and it was just a sight. Just to see a neighborhood burning was heartbreaking.
They were definitely nervous. I don't think they wanted us to go, but especially when we heard that there might have been kids trapped, there was absolutely no way we weren't going to go out and help people. And I trusted Pete. I was a little worried about the electricity, but he said, don't worry about it, we'll be all right.
And it was terrifying to know that maybe they weren't going to come back, and that we had a 7-month pregnant woman who was nervous. I didn't know if she was going to go into labor. I wouldn't let her stand near the window. I was yelling at her. So, I don't know.
I got here the same time an engine company pulled up to this hydrant actually right here. We're standing right in the location where me and Bobby were for 4 or 5 hours that night. The engine company pulled up. I said, hey boss, I'm a fireman, I work in Brooklyn. Do you need a hand? He goes, yeah, I need a hand. He goes, you and you, grab a line, stretch a line, and just, you know, there's the fire. So we did that for a couple hours, froze our asses off. To hook up to a hydrant underwater is definitely a challenge. You know, usually, I mean, it's all by feel at that point, you know, and it's not something you do regularly. You find them with your knees. You bang your shins on the hydrant, and you know that they're every 50 feet or so. Underwater firefighting is not something we're well versed in. Downtown here was burnt to the water line, so you kind of go for the most most vulnerable spot first. So the fire was traveling west. So we started at the furthest building, tried to protect the exposure, and worked our way back downtown, back east. And I mean, tough to say, but I think we did a pretty good job. It could have burnt all 116th Street if there's no fire companies here. The water was cold that night, but I mean, I wouldn't just go swimming in it. But when it has to be done, I really didn't notice it until I got home and I was freezing. But in the moment, it was the last thing on your mind. I mean, it really was. It was just you were so full of adrenaline. I have never seen a fire that big with that little resources, and just to see the guys working at night, busting their asses, you know, protecting my hometown. I mean, I'm sure a couple of guys live in Rockaway, but these guys aren't from Rockaway, and I give them so much thanks for protecting my neighborhood. You know, I mean, I came out here to see what I could do, see if I could help them, but to see a fire like that with only maybe a dozen guys, I mean, this would be a fire that brought several hundred guys to it, but you do what you got to do.
When they left for the second time, we had this one flashlight, and we stood by the window and we just kept on flicking the flashlight on and off. And they both had flashlights. So the first time when they went out, we saw the 2 lights. And then the second time we only saw 1 light. And it was definitely scary. We couldn't see who it was, but we knew it was one of them.
I came back by myself. And you could see Carrie was a little worried. I told her Pete's fine. There was nothing really for me to do at this point. So I think they were nervous, but they understood the situation.
I called it quits. Believe it or not, the fire was well under control after maybe 5 hours or so. I mean, for the most part, I think it pretty much burnt out its fuel load, and we did a decent job of containing it to just these 6 buildings here, which is amazing to even think about. And the sun started coming up. I had a pregnant wife, Bobby's girlfriend at home. I had, family comes first. You got to check on your family. So I said, listen, guys, I got to get back to my wife and Casey and see how they're doing. Because this was, it had to be hard on them too. We just leave, gone for 5 hours, they can't get in touch with us.
We decided to go up to the 3rd floor, the highest point, look out the windows to see what we could see, and sure enough, there was an orange glow out the front window, which was facing towards the harbor light and stuff. So then we checked the back window, and there was an orange glow out that way too, so there was fires in that direction. And you had really no perspective of how far away it was, because we were even thinking it was our neighbors, the Ford's house. We couldn't tell how far the fire was. It turns out it was about 4 blocks away.
Don't let it bring you down, it's only castles burning. Just find someone who's turning, and you will come around.
We smelled smoke and fire in the house, and we didn't know where it was coming from. I was ready to go to take a nap. It was 10 to 8. I thought we had done our preparation. I was tired from blah, blah, blah. And my husband called me, Kate, there's a fire somewhere. And we went checking the house, and then we felt secure enough that it wasn't in the house, but there wasn't a sense of total relief.
A little while later, I started smelling smoke, and then I saw the glow in the sky, and the embers started hitting the houses, and we knew it was a different monster after this.
And at that point, when I walked out on the porch, I smelled heavy black smoke. Not only smelled heavy black smoke, but to the left of me, I was able to see on the side of the house a hue of orange and red. And at that time, I went to the side of the house, leaned over, and I saw what looked like the sun coming up. It was just orange and red, and it was two homes engulfed in fire. At that point, the one house that I was looking at blew a gas line or something, because I had embers the size of baseballs raining over the house that I was in now.
Somewhere in the 9:30 range, me, my daughter, and my son began to notice that there were embers starting to blow down the block. We weren't sure from where. The wind was blowing about 50 miles an hour off the ocean towards the bay. And these embers were blowing pretty much in a direct line with my block and my house. We could see the glow of a fire that was probably about 100 yards away from us over at St. Francis de Sales. We couldn't see exactly where it was from. We knew it was closer to 129th and 130th, but the angle that the wind was blowing on was blowing directly in line with us. We could see that it was intensifying. We knew that there was about 4 feet of standing water outside the house, and that there was no way to put this fire out. There was no way any fire apparatus could get to it. So it burned unchecked. Burned one house next to St. Francis de Sales, 2 others caught in line with that house, then 3 or 4 others caught on the 130th Street side. So now we've got a real live fire, a big one going. Our big fear was that the harbor light on the corner of Newport and 130th was going to catch. It's a huge wooden structure. If that caught, then that really was pretty much the end for me and my neighbors as well too.
Like I said, in the beginning we were pretty calm. Our basement was flooded. Water started coming in the first floor, but then it was about 8:30. So we knew we didn't have much more to go as far as the water situation. But once they started smelling smoke and the embers started hitting the house, my girls started freaking out. They wanted to leave. And I wound up getting them on a kayak, taking them upwind to my in-laws' house, and we had refuge there. There were people actually also in my in-laws' house. Their neighbors from behind the block came over because they thought their house was going to catch fire. So it was about 20 people in their house.
I went over to Harbor Light, spoke to Bernie. There really wasn't much we could do. His roof caught. And once his roof caught, parted company with him, I went back to my house and I told my kids, let's get a change of clothes. We got to get out of here.
What happened was my dad and I went out to the porch, and my dad saw the flames. And right away we knew that it was the Harbor Light. And at first my dad said, get back inside. And when we went back inside, my dad, myself, and my mom looked at each other and said, we have to go.
It was like, where is it? And then we glanced out the back window and we saw a house on 129th, flames shooting up. And then it became more dire as the wind took the embers toward our home. And we had a wooden deck, and some of the flames weren't going out. And I remember saying, they're not going out, they're not going out. And there was a raging torrent in front of the house, so where do you go?
So my uncle lives, not only owns the Harbor Light with my cousins, but he lives there. And we had to go. It was just adrenaline, couldn't stay. We weren't able to rest unless we knew he was safe.
With that, I had said to the landlord and Cindy, grab what you can, because it looks like we're never coming back. You have 4 minutes. I ran upstairs. I got out of my clothes and into bathing trunks because I know I had a better chance in the water with less clothes on. Grabbed my personal belongings, which were credit cards and my birth certificate and even my mail and just things I could see with the flashlight that I had.
What had happened next, my neighbors, myself, we all knocked on each other's doors and we said, this thing's coming our way. We've got time, but we've got to get moving now. So I went into my house. I told my kids, I said, we got to pack up some essentials, just get some dry clothes. I had garbage bags, So we loaded some clothes in a bag. My son and daughter both suggested that we grab some electronics, which I thought was a great idea. So we grabbed a couple of contractor bags, threw 2 laptops, iPads, phones, everything in 2 bags, tied it up nice and tight, and then we head out. Initially, there were, I'm going to say 4 or 5 families on my block that had all left their houses, and we're all trying to figure which way to go.
You had to use your mind's eye because you had to walk in pitch blackness, you had to walk in water that was up to your chest, and you had to remember where the tree boxes were, where the front lamp posts and things were, so you wouldn't trip.
I was really scared because I knew the water was going to be like really cold, and I had to carry a flashlight, and we had to have hats over our faces because of the embers blowing in our faces, so it was scary.
When we got up the block, we saw Mary Smith on her step, and she said, "Come on in, Bernie's in here." And we went into the house. It was my mom, my dad, Mary, Bernie, and Dylan.
With that, they went in, and everyone else that was on the porch, I said, start grabbing twine, rope, extension cords, anything you can find. So I gave my flashlight to I believe it was Joey, and he started going through the house. I remember Bruce cutting the rope on the porch of the furniture that was being held down by rope, and all of a sudden the furniture was blowing away, but who cares at that point? We were getting rope. They would bring it to me, and I would make a lifeline that I needed to get, or a rope that I would need to get everyone across the street. I knew that I wasn't going to take them in the water because of the force of the water. It was coming down at such a clip, it looked like tsunami water. It was carrying boilers in it, door frames, couches, and I said that we were going to need a rope because if one person got lost in that water, I tell you, you would have got swept away down to the end of the block in seconds. And at that point, you don't even remember how to doggy paddle because everything goes out of your mind. You know, your panic sets in, and we could easily have lost someone to drowning.
And Michael McDonald came and said, we need to make a rope. So we had furniture tied up on the front porch. I went into the kitchen, got a knife, and with a flashlight, they started to cut up the rope. I had 2 cats in the house. I was trying to get them. They were sequestered, but they wouldn't come out. So I wasn't present for all of it. But then I remembered I had a container of extension cords, which I had brought up from the basement. So between the rope and the extension cords, now it felt like, okay, you know, there's a plan of action. But how is it going to be brought across the street through this raging torrent, like just water, stream, like rushing by?
And I can only thank God it was not too late. I can only thank God it was not too late.
Once the line was put together, I looked across the street and I saw someone swimming over on a surfboard, and I was amazed. It was Dylan Smith, and Dylan Smith is came right out of his window across the street, and you could just see the silhouette of him coming across right up to where I was tying the rope onto a tree over here.
And then out of the black, with embers pouring down, I don't even know where he came from. I didn't even know. All of a sudden, right at our steps, do you guys need help? It was Dylan. And it was like, oh, like, I just felt so much lighter. You felt everybody's spirits lighten up, because now we knew somebody could take that rope directly across the street without being brought. Just the corner was another raging torrent at Newport. And
once he arrived, he said, Mike, do you want to grab my pop surfboard and you and I will start ferrying people across? I said, no, Dylan, I think I'm going to be a little safer with rope, so that if we lose anyone, they can grab that rope. So he stood and waited right here by the tree with his board. And at that time now, our house caught on fire, the one that we were on the porch. So the neighbors across the street started yelling, you know, your house is on fire, your house is on fire, you got to go. So everyone was starting to get worried now, and I said, no, the house is on fire, but the porch isn't, and we got to keep getting more rope, because if we don't make it across the street and the rope falls short, all went to naught, and we don't have time to go back. So after finishing the rope, and me feeling secure, Dylan noticed that the house was on fire on the second floor and ran up, left his surfboard, ran up and started taking buckets of water to throw it on the fire, which he doused it out.
And Dylan and my husband and the Bavasso's son went upstairs and put the fire out, and then continued to rescue the other 3 people that were there.
He came back down, and at that time, Kate came down. She found extension cord, really long extension cord, and I said, now we have enough to get across. And I brought with me here the rope that we put together. This rope is made from twine. This is the twine that was holding down the patio furniture. Extension cords, lamp cords, anything we could find. And once again, using my mind's eye is what was able to create these knots to keep it together. And you're only as strong as the knots that you made. Once the rope was made, Dylan got his his surfboard leashed on again, and he swam the end of the cord across the street, which saved me the time to have to swim it over. And time we were running out of at this point. Once he tied it off and fastened it to the other side of the street, which is over there, the brick house, which we felt we had a better shot in because the house was brick. I took her down and I would bring it to the tree box here, which was our first area that we would take them to, so that now we had to get them across the street. Once we stepped off into the street, the water was moving at such a clip that it was able to move boilers, couches, door frames. So you had to be careful about getting hit by one of those, because that would take you out. I brought Janet down. I remember I put Janet on Dylan's surfboard because Dylan said that he felt more comfortable with her on the surfboard, and I said, go ahead. I would watch him take her across, because I would only allow one person to go across at a time so that we didn't stress out the line and it would break. I remember yelling over to Dylan. I said, Dylan, please, of all people, don't let Janet go. Don't let Janet go. He looked back at me and says, Michael, I'm a lifeguard. This is what I do. That's the first time I found out he was a lifeguard. So it even brought a better sense of security now, and I felt very good. But we got the rest Kathy over. Kathy, I told I would never let her go, and I walked her across the street myself. I remember that the first step off of the curb here would leave me into 7 feet of water, so I had to take a breath. Ask her to just choke my neck so that she wouldn't lose me, and I'll use the line and get myself across the street. As you get to the middle hump of the street, you were able to come back up and get another breath of air, and I remember that was a little tricky.
And then we just watched the house burn and knew that it was continuing down the block. I'm sorry. It was just horrible. It was horrible. It was horrible. I'm sorry.
I remember when Dylan and I finally got everyone across the street and everyone was in safety. Dylan looked at me, and he knew that everyone was across the street. He just looked at me, and we didn't have to say anything, and I just saw him splash back in the water and swim away. And I know where he was going. I know that he was going down the block because he saw where the fire was heading. By the time all of us were across the street, which we were the 4th house, the 5th house, and then the corner house was the 6th house. Then you saw the embers bouncing off the Harbor Light, and once he saw that, I know that he worked there. He knew that there were people in there, and he swam off that way.
And at that point, I saw Dylan. He comes out on his surfboard, and we hear some screaming in the distance. So it came from 129th Street. So I start walking over that way, and Dylan starts paddling over. And by the time I was able to make it through the water, Dylan had already grabbed a couple people, brought them over across the street. It was thick black smoke. You really couldn't see much until you got up close to the people. He must have taken about 3 or 4 people, maybe could be more like 6. Across the street, there's a big multiple dwelling there, brick building, and it was away from the wind. At that point, we started making our way back towards his house, and I kept asking him, hey, what about these old people that live here? He said, no, they're gone. I said, what about the Haydens? No, they're not there. and this couple on the corner, the McGowans, they're an older couple. Their house was about to take off. And I said, how about them? He goes, no, they're good, they're good. So, I mean, he knew exactly where his neighbors were, and he knew who was in danger and who was in area of refuge, area of safety. So at that point, I said, man, this kid, he's pretty sharp. He asked me what we're doing next. I told him I got to go check out on my neighbor's aunt. We make our way across the street, and you can start seeing people coming towards us. And at this point, it's pretty smoky, and embers are raining down. It turns out to be my friend Ray, him and his 2 kids.
My brother-in-law lived on 131st Street on the other side of the fire. So we actually walked towards it and then away from it. So we would have been on the other side of the fire line. As we got to the corner of Newport and 130th Street, there were it was myself, my son Ray, my daughter Lauren, a next door neighbor who just happened to be sitting on his porch and had nowhere to go. We joined onto our little caravan, a couple other people.
And Lauren, who's maybe about 5 feet tall, they all had a bag with them, whatever they could grab, quick bag of clothes, I guess, and trying to keep Lauren up above. You know, the water's about this high on me, and you could tell she was struggling.
The time that I felt like I was in trouble was when I got to my corner and I took a step down and I couldn't stand, and then so that I went back up on the curb and I didn't know what to do.
We got to the corner, and it was at least chest deep, probably up to here on me. I had no problem with it. My son had no problem with it. The water wasn't raging at that point. It was more sitting than flowing. But my daughter, who had a broken hand at the time, she couldn't get across.
When I told my dad I was in trouble, he didn't know what to do because he was he had to bring himself too, and he was holding bags of clothes and electronics, and my hand was broken, so I was holding it in the air. So
she said to me, Dad, I can't make it. So I turned around. I was about to go to her, and I don't really know where Dylan Smith came from at that point, but he popped up on a surfboard next to her. He had a surfing hoodie on. He had a full wetsuit on, and he helped her get up on a board.
Then Dylan came over and he took me on the surfboard, and I was half on, half off. I didn't know really what was going on. And he took me until I could stand on higher grass, and I just thanked him, and I never saw him after that.
And I looked at him, and with the surfing hoodie on, I didn't recognize him. He lives about 100 feet away from me, and I've seen him around the neighborhood quite a bit, over in Hobolite and just around. And I didn't recognize him because of the surfing hoodie, and I said, "Who are you?" He said, "It's Dylan Smith." I said, "Dylan, I can't thank you enough." He kind of looked at me and gave me almost like a half a smirk, and he said, "No problem." And off he went with my daughter. He took her across the street, pushed her to a lawn that was probably about 2 or 3 feet higher than the average grade, and she got off, and off he went.
He wound up grabbing Dylan, saw Lauren, grabbed her, threw her on the surfboard, and helped her along. And in the meantime, my neighbor's aunt was right behind them. I said, "Are you Aunt Patty?" She said, "Yes, I am." I said, "Come with us." So we helped her across to her niece's house.
What he had done before he helped us, I did not know that he had been involved in helping people all night long. I believe that all that took place before we left my house. The people that he helped, their houses caught fire before mine did.
Dylan Smith is a friend of our family, and I've known him since he was born. Our families are friends, and we're on the same volleyball team. He's a very competitive young man and a lover of life, and what he did that night, saving all those people, it didn't surprise me at all, because I know his character, and if somebody needed help, he'd be there.
Dylan had just came back from saving, I believe it was 6 or 8 people from on a surfboard, and I spent the night there, and basically what the two of us did was we opened up the side door, and he opened up a folding chair, and he just sat there, and the two of us stared out the window. He was sitting in the chair, and I was kneeling next to him, and we were just kind of staring out and just watching the harbor light burn. And we'd have conversations here and there, but it was mostly just staring at the block.
We were in the house watching the houses burn, and I heard my neighbors from across the street screaming. So I knew I had to do something. She was trying to convince me not to go, but threw on my wetsuit and grabbed my surfboard and hopped out the window. I swam across the street, where me and another guy, Mike, tied together anything we could find, ropes, wires, everything. And I swam one end of the rope across the street to our neighbor's house over here, where we tied it off to the railing, swam back, and one by one threw each person on my surfboard, carried them across until everyone was out of the house.
I didn't realize what he had done that night and how many people had helped, and I had only heard that within a couple of days after the storm. And the day after the storm, I said to quite a number of people, I said, I have no idea where Dylan Smith came from that night. For him to just have shown up at that precise moment in time when I absolutely needed it, he was sitting there at the ready. You know, he was looking to help people. He didn't just look out the window and say, there's a family struggling. He was there within literally seconds of me realizing that I could not get my daughter across the street. So I did see him a couple times afterwards, thanked him, and he didn't seem like he really was too interested in hearing the thanks or the praises. I saw his parents a number of times afterwards, and I said, your son was amazing. It was amazing. There's really no better words to describe him. He was amazing.
But I didn't even know Dylan was my neighbor, that he was the one that did it. And I saw Mary the next day, and I didn't even know to tell her thank you so much for allowing your son to come out and do that for us.
Yeah, there is. It takes a tremendous amount of strength and character to do what he did. He downplayed it. He made it sound as if it was run-of-the-mill. And I think it was run-of-the-mill, which speaks volumes to me that that's the type of person he was. That's the type of character that he had. There was no question. He didn't say, I'm going to go do this brave, heroic act. It was instinct. He just did it. It was natural. And the mere fact that he shunned whatever attention was coming his way just showed to me he was a hell of a kid.
Afterwards, and Dylan told me how he went out and helped so many other people, and I just thought, what an amazing guy, and that, so young and so brave and so selfless that even though his parents were telling him not to do it, he knew he had to do it, and thank God he did. I hope to God I never ever forget him. I hope to God I never forget. I'm shaking, I'm sorry. It's just...
I remember I had said that in the Daily News that he was a guardian angel in a wetsuit, and there's no other better words to frame up what he was that night.
I am a child, I'll last a while. You can't conceive of the pleasure in my smile. You hold my hand, rough up my hair. It's lots of fun to have you there. God gave to you, now you give to me. like to know what you've earned. The sky is blue and so is the sea. What is the color when black is burned? What is the color? You are a man, you understand. You pick me up and you lay me down again. You make the rules, you say what's fair. It's lots of fun to have you there. God gave to you, now you give to me. I like to know what you've learned. The sky is blue and so is the sea. What is the color when black is burned? What is the color? I am a child, I'll last a while. You can conceive of the pleasure in my smile.